Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're undertaking an absolutely fascinating, deep dive analysis into how human patterns can reveal some seriously profound truths. We spend so much of our time looking at isolated events in history, right? Or just focusing on single, standalone quotes from historical figures. But what happens when we zoom out? What happens when we look at the entire tapestry of a life, the complete network of someone's actions, and start connecting all those abstract, scattered dots? Well, when we map out those human patterns mathematically and philosophically, a completely undeniable picture starts to emerge. So today, we're going to explore a supreme case study in coherence and examine how one incredible life's pattern points absolutely and resolutely toward one monumental concept. Okay, let's dive into this. Imagine watching someone very, very closely over the course of decades. If you examined literally all of their life decisions, every single word they spoke in public and private, and every action they took, and you saw all of those things continuously converge on one single, unwavering point, wouldn't that be the absolute strongest proof of what they truly believe? I mean, it's a simple, undeniable psychological reality. You can fake a belief for a day or, maybe even a year, but you cannot fake the entire overarching pattern of a lifetime. If everything anchors to one idea, well, that idea is the center of their universe. Today, we're taking this highly relatable, everyday psychological concept and scaling it all the way up into a major theological case study. Section 1. Finding the center of a life. The pattern of human behavior. Now, what's really interesting about this is how we can actually map out the prophet's life as a vast network of interconnected nodes. Every node is a decision, a statement, an action. And when you connect them, you really begin to see a trajectory. The scholar Bediüzzaman Said Nursi approaches this historical record not by asking us to just look blindly, but by treating the prophet's life analytically. It's actually a lot like a data scientist finding a definitive trend line in a bunch of scattered data. He categorizes these aspects into specific, verifiable data points: miracles, logical proofs, and documents of truth. Now, in a standard historical analysis, you might look at these as totally separate phenomenons. But in a consistency analysis, these are the dots on our graph. Every miracle performed, every logical proof presented, every document of truth recorded, these are all individual vectors. And the fascinating question is, where are all of these vectors pointing? If you trace the trajectory of all this data simultaneously, what's the actual target?
So the crucial point is, if we track all these vectors, where do they point? They converge right here, Hashir, the resurrection. After the foundational belief in the oneness of God, all of those scattered data points in the prophet's life, every single miracle, every logical proof, every document, they intensely converge into this one central glowing concept. It's not just that he mentioned the resurrection a few times in passing, it's that the entirety of his mission, the complete gravitational pull of his life's work, pulls directly toward the reality of humanity being resurrected.
Section 2. Bediüzzaman's Consistency Analysis, the Supreme Case Study in Coherence. All right, this is where theology meets rigorous logical deduction. Think about it. If a message is completely coherent, it literally cannot have contradictions, and its peripheral arguments must always support its core thesis. Bediüzzaman applies this test of absolute coherence to the prophet's life, stating that all miracles, proofs, and documents of truth pointing to his prophethood all simultaneously testify to the realization of the resurrection. This brilliantly illustrates the core of our explainer today. The logic here is incredibly profound. Bediüzzaman is arguing that a whole life's pattern, not just isolated words, is the ultimate undeniable proof. He's saying that because the prophet's entire mission, his whole identity as a prophet, was so deeply intertwined with the message of resurrection that if you accept the validity of his prophethood through his miracles and proofs, you are inherently and mathematically accepting the reality of the resurrection. You just can't separate the two. The miracles don't just prove he is a prophet. They simultaneously prove the specific, central claim of his prophethood, that the resurrection will happen. Let's move to and see how this builds, because this profound consistency isn't just an isolated case. We've established that the prophet's life and miracles converge on the truth of the resurrection, right? But it actually aligns perfectly in strict parallel with the historical patterns of all the other prophets before him. Every miracle and proof brought forward by previous prophets throughout history essentially testifies to this exact same truth. So you have multiple lifetimes, multiple vast networks of data points across entirely different eras, and they are all converging on the exact same center of gravity. The coherence is absolute. Section 3. The Quran's Promise of Resurrection, the ultimate scriptural backing. So we've spent time analyzing the logical framework and the life patterns. Now let's look at the ultimate synthesis. Bediüzzaman's logical framework perfectly mirrors the insistent, powerful emphasis found directly in Scripture. The text doesn't just mention resurrection as a possibility, it frames it as an absolute guarantee. It says, they swear by Allah their most binding oaths that Allah will not resurrect the dead. But no, it is a true promise binding on him, but most people do not know. This text from Surah An-Nahl serves as the ultimate validation of everything we've mapped out today. It addresses the skeptics directly, the people who swear binding oaths against the possibility of the dead rising. And it counters them not just with a mild correction, but with a definitive, undeniable declaration. It is a true promise binding on him. This is the foundational text that the entirety of the Prophet's life, his miracles, and his proofs were pointing toward all along. It is the undeniable center of the web.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want you to ask yourself, have you ever watched all the decisions in someone's life and realized they point to one single value? When we apply this consistency analysis to the Prophet, we see that all the evidence, all the miracles, and the entirely coherent message of his life, alongside all the prophets before him, point to the absolute reality of the resurrection. It is a true promise. I really encourage you to look for these undeniable patterns of consistency, not just in this theological case study, but in the world around you. Because when the dots all connect to one place, you really can't ignore what they're pointing at. Thank you so much for joining me for this analysis. Keep observing, keep questioning, and keep connecting the dots.